This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, and I've got the excellent Ryan Thomas here. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you on the show. You know, we haven't actually, I don't think, met in person yet. And so I was really happy when you responded, yes, I'd love to be on the show, because I love your videos, and you and I kind of seem to be camera nerds a little bit too, mobile camera nerds. So I figured we'd have a lot to talk about. So that's kind of what got me all excited here. You saw the topics. I think I want to talk a little bit about your last couple of videos, your personal channel, and of course, the other work you do. So you talked about the X100 Ultra and your experience with that. And then, you know, you had a whole discussion, which I think is a really interesting point, about telephotos on Chinese phones versus telephotos on, well, let's say, you know, non-Chinese phones. Even though technically a lot of iPhones are made in China, but whatever, right? Are Pixels made in China? I don't know. I think not all of them. I think Samsung.
I always get the comment, yeah, but iPhones are Chinese technically too. And it's like, sure, if you want to be pedantic about it.
Well, they also make them in India, and they also make them in, I think, Vietnam now, or they're starting to. But I think Pixels are also made in like another part of the world. But Samsung, I'm pretty sure it's Korea still. So
yeah.
All right, so let's get started on that. What are your thoughts? I mean, it's obviously not a new phone, but I think it's such a significant phone. I've never had a chance to play with it more than a few minutes at a time, unfortunately. So I'm kind of living vicariously through you on this one. We've got the X200 Pro right now. There's rumors of an X200 Ultra, but until then, your assessment is that this is the best camera phone on the market today, which is a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors to phones now, isn't there? Because it's not just hardware. There's a lot of AI stuff coming into play with the Honor stuff. A lot of the Chinese phones, incidentally, including the Vivo. But I think there's just sometimes, you know, no replacement for displacement, as they like to say in the car world. But,
That's right.
You know, and I think the Vivo, especially the Ultra, is such a difficult phone to meander around, because it was never really sold outside of China, and the Chinese ROM that's on it's a little bit tricky to sort of, you know, westernize, if you want to say that.
I'm familiar with that, yes.
Yeah. And I just think that, you know, it reminds me so much of when Huawei was breaking through with stuff in the P20, the P30. This is like almost a 2023 or 2024 version of that, where it's just more hardware than you'll find on any sort of Ultra phone or Pro Max, whatever, over here. And I think, you know, for us camera nerds, sometimes, you know, you can have as much portrait effect as you want. You can have, you know, AI do a great job, but sometimes you just want to get the shot. And when you're there in the moment, having the hardware to capture that, you know, obviously there's a lot of processing going on, as there is pretty much every single smartphone camera. But with the Vivo, it just feels so almost raw in that sense, that you have the 1-inch sensor for the main, which for me is underrated. The X200 Pro has, I believe, the same telephoto, which is a 1/1.4 inch, 3.5-ish times periscope. So sort of smaller optically than you'll find in the Pixel Pro or the iPhone Max. But actually the bigger sensor allows you to get that and jump
it's
to
200 megapixels. So you can do bidding and cropping kind of twice, basically.
Yeah.
You degrade a bit as you zoom in, of course, but you still give you a lot of headroom, right?
Absolutely. I just think that, you know, the X200 Pro has seen a lot of praise recently. I've seen some more. I think Marquez even showed it off in one of his videos.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. But I think that phone is maybe just a little bit more globally accepted, I guess, or is seen as more of an option versus the X100 Ultra, which really wasn't intended to be that global device. And I would be very interested if the rumored X200 Ultra is a global phone as well. You know, if it is, maybe it's just a reaction to how popular the X200 Pro has been. So it makes Vivo go, actually, maybe we do need to serve this to a bigger audience.
I think there's a parallel to be had here. I was in Antarctica around this time of year last year. I did a cruise there, and I took the Oppo Find X7 Ultra with me. At the time, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra wasn't available yet. So that was all I had. That was China's best, basically, that I could get my hands on. And then I brought, of course, the iPhone 15 Pro Max at the time, the S24 Ultra, and the Pixel 8 Pro at the time. And I did a comparison, and it was very interesting. Obviously, the Oppo won overall, but I see a parallel because, I've got the Find X8 Pro here. And I love it. I love what I'm getting out of that phone in terms of performance and image quality. But as you said, there's no replacement for displacement. Like the specs, and it's not quite as big of a set of sensors, but somehow they've managed to get very close, if not in some areas like zooming, I think, potentially exceed the X7 Ultra. And so I think, and that's a global phone, and there's rumors, of course, of Find X8 Ultra coming that's also global. So I think Vivo and Oppo are kind of doing a parallel thing. They're seeing the success they had, the accolades they received for last year's Ultra that you're going to tell us more about. And then, they did the Pro and it went over really well with the new series. So they're thinking maybe we should do the Ultra as well.
Yeah, and I think they might have also seen, the S24 Ultra, the S25 Ultra, this generation of Pixel, iPhone, and Galaxy Ultra just really not necessarily make as big a leap over their predecessors as maybe some people were hoping for, and see that opportunity, that gap in the market of actually, no, this is what an Ultra phone should look like, because I'm sure there's a lot more to it than just, making your phone more available in different regions. But I feel like there is an opportunity there to really make, put them on the map for not just enthusiasts like us, but, just the general public as well.
I agree. And then you see the stagnation on the iPhone and the Galaxy. I've got the S25 Ultra and it's a very good phone. I can't fault it per se, but it's just not very exciting. And, yes, the photos are good, but they don't excite me and I don't feel like it's the phone I want to grab. Right now, I think for me, it's of the phones I have, since I don't have the Vivos, it's a toss between the Find X8 Pro and the Xiaomi 14 Ultra from last year, since I don't have the 15 Ultra yet, obviously. So, if I had to pick one, I know there's others. There's like the Pura phones from Huawei that I've not managed to get my hands on at all. I don't know if you have any seat time with them.
I've tried one out, but I haven't been able to sort of do a proper review of one.
Yeah.
And it's a similar situation in that, they're not meant to be, they're not the same kind of Huawei that the Huawei was in its prime, if you get what I'm saying. It's not the same kind of energy going there.
It's still pretty interesting what they're doing, though. And I considering the restrictions they have, I'm kind of actually impressed with, there's still one of the few that's putting RYYB and variable aperture even on mid-rangers like the Nova phones, which is kind of interesting. And, speaking of displacement again, but the other thing is you've obviously played with the Find X8 Pro. Like, how would you rate that, say, compared to, and the Find X7 Ultra as well, I presume?
Yeah.
So how would you kind of like, put them on a scale if I mean, to me, they're all really high up there, right? But like, which one do you prefer for what? Because I think that's what it boils down to, right? Like if you look at, you're comparing like last year's 14 Ultra from Xiaomi with the Oppo Find X7 Ultra. It's like, well, I like the variable aperture on the 1-inch sensor versus not having it on the Oppo. But for telephoto, I kind of felt like the Oppo had the edge, right? And I think that the X8 Pro is actually even somewhat, in some ways, more impressive, possibly because of what you discussed in your video, which is this AI zoom, which is a little iffy, right? Like sometimes you'll zoom on some text and the text becomes less clear, but the rest of it is clearer. And you're like, yeah, it can't understand what it's magnifying, so it does gibberish on it. I hope they can fix that because I'm very impressed with like 30x on the X8 Pro is like, what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think like one of the use cases that I've seen personally from friends and family who have these phones with the big zooms is like trying to make out what a sign says in the distance. And, if the text is just going to turn to just a mess, like what's the point? I feel like that's one of the perfect, use cases for a zoom lens. So to have an AI able to interpret it and spit out the correct, 'cause it's very difficult to do, but I'm sure not impossible, spit out the correct, text on a sign. That's like, I'm sure going to please more of the general public than, what you might imagine just as a thought experiment versus the reality of people actually doing it. But no, I totally agree with that. The Find X8 Pro, if I often think about this, I suppose I have to because it's part of my
It's
job.
our
But
jobs. Yeah.
if I could have any phone, I think it would be the Find X8 Pro for its balance, because sure, it doesn't have the 1-inch sensor, it doesn't have the crazy zoom, and I love those things about the Vivo. But also, like, let you in on a little secret here, my personal phone's still a OnePlus 12.
No, I know. You tell
know?
us all the time. I know, it's great.
So, like, I just think what Oppo and OnePlus have done with the Hasselblad colors, they make that camera system for me, even if the hardware isn't there, maybe if it isn't technically as excellent, maybe it's not giving you a shallow depth of field, or it's not as dynamic looking, the almost like filmic quality to the natural colors out of the Hasselblad setup, for me,
Yeah.
just like, oh, you can't beat
I
it.
love their color science.
Mhm.
Better than Leica, actually.
Mhm.
Better than anything else like Zeiss on Sony or Zeiss on Vivo. It's very impressive, I have to say.
It
And it
really
seems
is.
to be getting better even.
Yeah.
Like I need to probably pull out my Find X7 Ultra and update it to the latest version and, go and take more photos again, because it's been, probably 9 months since I've touched it, other than just basic, like 5 seconds here and there.
Mm.
So we'll see. But I think I'm with you. I think the most balanced flagship I've used so far this year that's attainable globally is the Find X8 Pro. And the OnePlus 13's been really solid, but it's feels like a bit of a letdown after you've played with the X8 Pro.
It kind of does. I think with the 13, and I got a load of stick for this, for basically saying,
Yeah.
because when I reviewed the OnePlus 12, everyone was still saying the same. So, and I'm sure it's a conspiracy theory, but it's essentially like, what do you have on a OnePlus review? Cameras are bang average. But actually, I noticed in the OnePlus 11, the cameras were improving. And then when I got to the 12, it was like, wow, guys, these are actually really good. And every other review, seemingly, I'm sure this is not the case, but it felt like it from my point of view, was, yeah, the cameras are OnePlus level. It's like, hang on, no, these cameras are really good.
I
Like,
agree. I was losing my mind. Even on 13 reviews, literally, I read reviews saying the camera is just, I'm like, are you nuts? Have you used the camera?
Yeah.
Like, this is in many ways an improvement over the 12.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, how can you not see that? And I think that just goes to show that there's a lot of reviewers that don't really review the phones very extensively.
Sure.
They just go through the motions. Maybe it's because of crunch time, the embargoes or whatever.
Sure.
I get it, but also because unlike us, they're not camera nerds, and I think they don't understand, or they don't really look carefully, and they're so used to the status quo, right? Which for North America here, not here because I'm in Germany, but North America is Samsung, Google and Apple, and I think that's part of the problem. But yeah, I couldn't believe the OnePlus 12, OnePlus 13 reviews that were saying that. Also, OnePlus Open, when it came out, I'm like, that's a leap. That's a massive leap.
Absolutely.
That was the first massive OnePlus leap, in my opinion. That was like, and we'll talk about the N5 very soon. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the cameras on that, because there's some changes there. But I think overall, you're right. So Vivo, like, if you had to guess that they're going to make the X100 Ultra available globally, do you think that might become your go-to, or are you going to stay with the 12?
I don't know, because I thought when I bought my X100 Ultra that I would switch to it, but I think I'm constantly changing phones, right?
Of
for
course.
reviews. That's
Yeah.
just kind of like part of the job.
That's
but
what we do.
I always come back to the 12. It's something that I didn't necessarily realize. I've been reviewing phones for years, didn't realize was sort of part of what makes a good phone personally for me, is the way that something feels in the hand. And it's crazy because we've seen this shift to flat-sided phones, or near enough flat-sided phones. The OnePlus 13 has gone way flatter on the sides, even versus the Oppo Find X8 Pro. The iPhones have been flat-sided for a while. Samsung started to do it as well. But I just find that a slightly curved edge in my hand, maybe I've got strange shaped hands, just feels better. And it will be interesting to see what the X200 Ultra does with the size. I imagine it will be a flat front. with sort of slightly tapered side, sort of like the Find X8 Pro. But yeah, that for me is a way bigger a way bigger consideration than I really thought it would be, especially like if you'd have asked me the same question last year, I'd have said, no, that's fine. There are way more important things than how the phone feels in the hand.
Yeah.
Whereas now that's maybe my top thing. Maybe aside from the
Yeah.
cameras, it's my top thing.
That's interesting. Yeah. The X200 Pro, does that have curved edges or does it have a flat screen?
It's kind of like tapered edges, not completely flat from what I can work out. So it's not like the iPhone. It's maybe closer to what Oppo is doing with the X8 Pro, where, under a microscope, it looks curved, but really it's just subtly curved to help with ergonomics.
Yeah.
Which is technically what I prefer.
I think I'm pretty happy with that 2.5D glass front and back on the current crop of BBK group phones, the flagships. I do think it's interesting that the Find X8 Pro feels better in hand to me than the OnePlus 13, even though if you look at them, overall design is very similar. But, I think the other thing that makes the X8 Pro so nice for me is that it's actually really thin. And it's not like I'm not in one of those thickness freaks that it doesn't really matter to me, but I have to say that I've really noticed that with the X8 Pro. Even the OnePlus 13 is thinner than the 12, but it doesn't feel that thin in hand compared to the X8 Pro for some reason. And then you look at the numbers and you're like, how do I feel such a difference? And I think it's just the way the edges are finished, right? I think they're slightly more integrated on the Oppo than the OnePlus. And then, of course, there's Realme with the GT7 Pro, and that's kind of more like the OnePlus, it feels like to me in hand. So, but yeah, in-hand feel is super important, and I agree with you. I'm a little bummed that, we're going slab size for everything. Like even Xiaomi's gone slab size on their flagships in the last couple of years. It's just so boring,
Well, it's also like our hands aren't shapes like that.
No.
There's a reason that we moved away from flat sides in the first place, because they're not ergonomic. They look cool. Like, I cannot deny that when I see a render of like a Pixel 9 Pro or whatever, it looks a certain way. I'd really like it. But when you hold it in the hand, and maybe the Pixel 9 Pro is a bad example because it being the smaller model, and the same with the iPhone 16 Pro, it does feel better. But the bigger ones, the Maxes, the Ultras, it's just not, I mean, they can't really make a different shaped phone. It just wouldn't fit in the lineup if they made two different shapes for technically the same family of phone. But no, I agree with you. The same with the OnePlus 13. I had quite a few comments on that video when that came out, and I said, yeah, this just doesn't feel great in the hand. And everyone was like, yeah, but it's thinner. And I'm like, sure, but it doesn't, like, you got to feel it. You actually have to hold the thing to understand, the ergonomics of it. Numbers are very important. I'm glad that, a lot of us use objective metrics in some of our testing, but some stuff is also subjective.
100%. Yeah. It's the same with color signs, right? Like it's going to be a preference thing. And then, the other thing too is like I was kind of curious how you feel about this, the switch to the tri-prism from the periscope on the 3X on, the latest BBK group phones. Obviously the Z depth is much more improved and it's much more compact in terms of real estate in the phone, and I get that. But I do feel that you're losing a bit of clarity because you got more mirrors there, right? And more reflections going on. Like it's subtle, but it's there. And in that sense, I'm kind of hoping that the Ultra phones coming out this year are gonna not sacrifice, a traditional L-shaped periscope at the cost of maybe a battery or real estate or thickness or something. Yeah, because with the batteries now, the silicon carbon anode stuff, like you can, if it's 6,000, like that's awesome. I'm happy. Like it doesn't, even 5,500, I'd be perfectly happy, frankly. So we'll see, right? I guess.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When it first came out, my 13 unit at the very least was significantly softer at long range compared to the 12. It's also using, from what I can tell, a slightly different sensor, but there have been some significant updates to the 13.
It's true.
And I need to do an objective comparison once again, because the 13 camera just seems to kick out more, not realistic, maybe reliably sharp long range photos for me. And maybe it's doing something in processing there that it wasn't doing when they first released the phone, because there have been a couple of camera updates. There was also an issue with Ultra HD 4K 60 jitter, which has since been patched as well. And yeah, I want to take another look at that because it's just such a. I get what you're saying. You kind of you're gaining that extra space by having the smaller sort of package, but with the silicon carbon batteries, you can make them the same size as the previous batteries, but with more, milliamp hours in them. Then you don't need that extra space. If you get where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
you can afford to put a traditional prism telephoto in there and still have a massive battery. So yeah, it's going to really depend on what they can do in software to compensate. And this is an issue, or maybe not an issue, maybe a potential issue that we might run into in the next couple of years, where sure, these phones out of China are going to have crazy hardware in them. Maybe over here, with our Galaxies, our iPhones, and our Pixels, these companies are just going to use software to try and bridge the gap. Because I don't really know many people personally who use these phones, even enthusiasts who are crying out for extra hardware.
Right.
And so maybe the big dogs just go, well, why would we spend another, 10 million, whatever, trying to or trying to create something better when we can just do it in software, send out a patch, or save the patch for the next phone, and then we don't have to create new hardware there. And then just sort of, the perception is the camera's improved, but to enthusiasts, we know that the hardware might be the same or only marginally different from its predecessor, which wouldn't warrant to us an upgrade, but to everyone else who can now draw around their friends and move them around in photos in AI, like, wow, this is a crazy new feature. And I'm not knocking that. I know that these tools, especially with the Google Pixel ones, Pixels have become very popular in the UK. And I think it's largely due to Google's almost all the marketing around the Pixel is Magic Editor,
Mm-hmm.
Magic Eraser.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense, right? Because what if you just want to get rid of someone in your photo? You want a photo of you and your friend. You don't want the random standing behind you. You just remove them. Like
Yeah.
these are genuinely useful things that once before, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, people were sending it to some subreddit saying, can you Photoshop out this person for me, please? And now they can just do it on their phone instantly. And but again, it comes back to, are we going to see almost shortcuts being made because you can just do it all in software? Or are the Vivos and the Oppos going to actually light a fire under these other companies to go, oh, actually, we do need to improve our hardware? Because it's the same main sensor on the S25 Ultra, I believe, as the S23 Ultra.
Yeah.
So it's the 3 generations of phone using exactly the same main camera sensor. So we're verging on that. People used to meme the Pixel for having the same camera sensor for 5
Yeah.
generations. We're starting to get to that stage now, guys. Like, where is this innovation coming from?
I think you make a valid point. I think the last time we really saw a Chinese company push Samsung, at least, and then eventually Apple followed suit, was when the P40 Pro Plus, right? Huawei, with the dual periscope telephotos or dual telephotos. I think one was periscope, one wasn't. And, we saw that with the S22 Ultra or 21 Ultra. 21 Ultra that had the dual telephoto. And so they finally were like, okay, we're doing this. But Apple hasn't really followed suit. They went with a tri-prism thing. Like Google, there's this big gap between, 2x, which is kind of pseudo lossless, and like 5x. And when you shoot at 3.5, it's really not optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is kind of why, I'll put a link to your videos in the show notes, but I think the last video you just did talking about, like how the zoom setup on Chinese phones, the pros and ultras that we've just gotten, is so good, right? And I think that's because, you're doing a 3x, but you're doing a really large sensor or a large number of pixels on the sensor. In the case of the X100 Ultra there, it's 200 megapixel, and it pays off. Like, you can really see it, and it gives you a nice continuous, zoom ability, right? And you don't lose that magic. You say you shoot mostly at 3x, I shoot mostly at 2x. And so, yeah, you don't, even at 2x, you lose some, but it's not terrible. And so I think that's I want to see more of that. But I have a feeling that we're in a different world than we were when the P40 Pro Plus came out. First of all, Huawei is no longer, that relevant, sadly, in the West. And then I don't know if Xiaomi and BBK Group are big enough to influence Samsung and Apple, at least in the Western markets. It's kind of crazy to me, honestly, that Google, as you said, they're popular in the UK. They're doing great in Japan. They're doing okay in the US, actually, better than ever. And it's actually kind of surprising. I always joke I'm a Pixel hostage, like that's my main phone always because, well, it works well in the West, especially in North America. And I love the Pixel software. And I kind of feel like I have Stockholm syndrome because of it, because the hardware is really not that great. Like Tensor is kind of crap. But at the same time, the latest cameras, at least starting with the 6 Pro, have been solid. They're fine. Like they're not the crappy hardware that they had when they had that 5th generation of 12 megapixel OIS main sensors, right? But at the same time, it's not what you're talking about we're seeing on these Chinese phones. So I kind of feel like I'm trapped in pixel land for my daily driver, but at the same time, I'm always carrying more than one phone, so it doesn't really matter, right? Too much if I really want to. So as far as the X100 Ultra goes, obviously the cameras are outstanding, and that's not too surprising. It's a Chinese phone, so you have to jump through some hoops. Is there some things about it that are not imaging that you feel are really solid on that phone? And are there any things that you felt like, I'm like, oh, that was a bit disappointing, because obviously not everything can be great.
Yeah, so it's similarly to it's kind of built like a big OnePlus 12. So it has the curved sides on the front and back. And I really like that about it. My one I bought secondhand, it came with a screen protector pre-applied. Kind of don't want to get rid of it because they're really hard to apply. So, but yeah, no, I do like the slight curves to it, especially on a phone that big. I mean, it is a massive phone. So I personally appreciate that. I like the charger in the box. I know that's not necessarily that in Europe, that seems to be just a trend of like, there's just no charge in the box in Europe. And because that phone was from China initially, I'm sure that has something to do with it. As much as I might understand a charger not being in the box on a cheaper phone, and usually people upgrade cheaper phones more regularly, so they might have a charger from their previous phone. When you're spending like, $1,000+ €1,000+ or pounds on a phone, and it doesn't come with a charger in the box, I understand.
Especially when you need that charger to get that speed, right? Like it's not
absolutely.
like you can pull out like some kind of PD 65-watt charger and be happy, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like it's not one universal standard, which if it was, then it makes more sense. Like someone's going to have a type of charger and then use that for every single phone they buy, regardless of the brand. But that's not really a thing, at least currently, with a lot of these Chinese phones at the very least. And I quite liked the Vivo software, HyperOS, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me much of when Realme had their version, I believe their fork of ColorOS, back with the Realme X2 Pro, which is like my all-time favorite Realme phone. I really like that phone. I spent a lot of time with it. I had like 3 review units of that phone, weirdly, and I loved it. But the software, I think a lot of people give a lot of these companies, enthusiasts at least, give a lot of these companies stick for software that isn't as polished, let's say, as Pixel Experience or One UI. I think maybe, with long-term software support, that's still a concern because not all these companies can match those guys,
right?
In terms of long-term support, which isn't just important for if you keep your phone for 7 years, but also on the second-hand market. The second or the third person owns that phone, are they still going to be able to get updates? To me, that's very important.
Yeah.
But the actual usage, like the user experience of the software on the Vivo, it's better than I was expecting. Obviously, there's a lot of Chinese stuff that you might want to remove, or you might, you have to add the Play Store via the Vivo App Store and stuff, which isn't really that big of a deal. If you know you're importing a phone, you kind of know, that's all part of the process.
I mean, my audience is totally okay with that.
Absolutely.
Right.
But no, I really enjoyed the software experience on it. The hardware, like the performance, the display, there's just a standard now that pretty much all the phones are. I think I wasn't expecting to. It is such to me, and everything's subjective in this. What I'm about to say, this is not an objective point, but it just reminded me so much of when Huawei did the Mate 20 Pro.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that phone where you're like, huh, yeah, this is so much better than the Galaxy Note. Why is everyone buying a Galaxy Note? And it feels like that with the Galaxy Ultra. Like, why would I buy a Galaxy Ultra? This is just better. But of course, in because we're at a time where it isn't a global phone. I'm sure the X200 Pro is a fantastic alternative to it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, that feeling, like I picked up so many phones, I rarely get that feeling of like, wow, this is just like epic. This is ultra, but that phone felt ultra.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. Having used some of these Ultra phones last year from Xiaomi and Oppo, yeah, they do really feel outstanding. And you're not giving up too much in the rest of the areas either. It's like, display performance, battery life, software, as you said, it's a bit subjective because it's a Chinese, OSs. But I don't generally mind. And most of the time, even like payments, everything seems to work fine. So that's fine to me. But yeah, I was going to ask you about something. Maybe you can solve a mystery for me, because I haven't had a Vivo phone with fast charging in a while. They send me the V series, but I think the last X series I've had was the X80 Pro
Right, yeah.
or whatever it was. And I'm wondering, is the SuperVOOC for Oppo, Realme, and OnePlus the same technology that Vivo is using for fast charging?
I
Are they
believe so.
compatible? Okay.
I believe so. This was something I was actually meaning to test like yesterday, but when I had it, I have it on my desk now. I'm pretty sure I can't give you an absolute answer because I cannot
Well,
remember. My memory is like
put it on
awful.
social media and let us know.
Oh yeah, I can do it after this and
maybe,
just ping you a message.
Maybe when I post the podcast on Sunday and you want to piggyback on that, just let us know. That'd be great. Because I would love to test it, and I have no way of doing that right now.
Yeah, I have the 100-watt charger from I believe it's an 80-watt charger in the box for the Vivo, or it's a 90-watt.
Cool.
And it's 100-watt with the OnePlus 12. So I will try the charger that it came with and the charger that came with the OnePlus.
It'd be interesting to see if if they're compatible and if it goes both ways. Yeah. But yeah, that's one thing that I enjoy about Chinese phones as well. Is the fast charging.
Absolutely.
It's not every day that you need it, but every now and then you need it, and you're like, oh my god, yes, I can top it off in no time, and it's really, really great. And same with wireless. I mean, of course you need a special charger and it gets complicated. And I kind of keep one of those, try to keep a charger for every phone and every wireless charger for every phone, like for the fast charging, just in case. But since I travel a ton, sometimes it's not accessible. So yeah. Cool. Well, listen, I'll link to your videos again, and I want to kind of pick your brain about some of the news items this week, starting with finally, like out of nowhere, Oppo has kind of made the Find N5 official. Mine is actually sitting at a DHL depot in San Francisco right now for when I get back on Friday. So by the time the audience is listening to this, I'll have it in my hands. I'll try to post some photos. We're allowed to post some photos. I'm super excited about that phone simply because I love the OnePlus Open so much, and I used it for almost an entire year. But also, having played with the Magic V3, which was so thin, I kind of thought that was cool. Like, I don't need it to be that thin, but yeah, it's very impressive. But, and this is not fact, folks, but there are rumors that the cameras are a little downgraded in some areas. Rumors of an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, for example, which I'm like, oh, come on. Couldn't you just give us 350 megapixels? How do you feel about that, if that's true, which we don't know right now?
Yeah, I mean, if that is the case, it does feel a little bit, I mean, it's underwhelming, right? But also I feel like it's a very difficult, foldable tech in general is very difficult because you are making phones for an extremely small percentage of people, if you really think about it. And how many of these people are going to be the same, camera enthusiasts? How many people are actually going to open that ultra wide? That it baffles me how many people I've met who they've gone to take a photo, say we're all together in a restaurant setting or whatever, and I go, oh, you can pinch out to get more people in the shot, and they're like, what? I didn't realize my phone could do that. And some of these are techie people, by the way.
Wow.
So how many, you start segmenting the amount of people who know what an ultra wide is and then are also using foldables, and then like it's got to be really difficult to balance those things to justify building foldables in the first place. Because it's not like when you build a hybrid as a car manufacturer and you can just write it off as tax or whatever. You need to really think about this, and there are real implications if you spend hundreds of millions whatever developing a phone and then it just doesn't sell. Like I feel for the companies that may need to make these tough decisions, but if they're just doing it to cut costs and for absolutely no other reason, that's a really that's a difficult thing to justify.
I think here it was
For sure.
thickness, because also rumors has it has wireless charging, which
Oh, okay.
at least personally, I was complaining about on the Open because I love wireless charging.
Mhm.
And so if it does that, I can understand there's compromise to be made. I don't think this was a cost thing because it's going to be expensive.
Mhm.
I look at it a little differently than you. I think I agree as your take, but I think for me, as a person who didn't really care too much about book style foldables until the Open. And
Mhm.
then when I got that, because it had such a good camera, I was like, it's the best of both worlds. And I started actually really enjoying the larger canvas of the inner screen and being more productive on it. Now I want my cake and eat it too. And so, I'm using a Pixel 9 Pro Fold right now a lot as my main phone. But again, the cameras are downgraded from the Pixel 9 Pro XL or 9 Pro. And I'm noticing it because every now and then I'll shoot something with the telephoto or with the ultra wide, and I'm like, it's good, but it's not as good. And so I'm, sample size of one, right? I'm a use case. But that being said, I also feel like the folding phones are in a way the Halo flagship. It's like, what I'm saying? It's like it's like the car manufacturers when they're making a Halo car, right? Acura NSX, Honda NSX was an example of that. Like you're not going to sell a lot of them, but it puts you in that kind of rarefied category. And like, you look at the Huawei Mate X6 and there's no compromise on the camera system. You get variable aperture. It's still really super thin. And so the question is, can we come up with a Halo product, as it were, that doesn't compromise camera and still foldable? And I felt like the Open was the first one to really do that, at least on the Western markets, right? And, we've seen that from Xiaomi. We've seen it from Huawei. We've seen it from, Oppo with the N3. But I'm kind of curious, if there's anything they could have done to just, kind of at least have parity with the Open, because that I think the main sensor and the telephoto are going to be fine, because even if the hardware is a little lesser, there's been a big improvement in almost 2 years or a year and a half in image processing, and seeing what the Oppo Find X8 Pro can do, I'm not too worried. I'm just it'll be like 8 megapixel ultra wide. Even 12 would have been a little better somehow. Like, I don't know. We'll see. But I'm very excited about I like getting my hands on mine and seeing how it performs. And are you going to get one? Are you excited too?
I'm not. I'm really intrigued to see if they do that as a base for I guess, a OnePlus Open 2, something like that. That would be more like what I'd look at. The problem with foldables in video creation, and maybe it's different for writing articles. I haven't written a review in article form in a few years, but at least in the video side, unless you're Marquez or making a video essay on your foldable, a foldable video usually performs incredibly poorly. Which it usually sways whether I get a unit or not. The OnePlus Open, I did a couple of videos on. They didn't do crazy numbers, but I did really like the Open. It was, like you said, the book style. I think it's just like it's such a good. It's one of those phones where I actually did switch to it permanently for like I think it was 2 months, and it wasn't something I was expecting to do. I believe I got my unit off of one of my colleagues, so they had already made content with it. I'd received it, and I started using it. And I was thinking, I'm glad I'm the end of the chain here, because then I don't have to send it to anyone else, and I can just carry on using it. Because I'd used the Galaxy Folds. I believe I used the 3, the 4, and the 5 to that point. I didn't use the first one or the second one.
Right.
But I always felt like that ultra thin, so you know what I mean, the very narrow cover screen, and it opens up and it's sort of a taller aspect ratio. I know that if you really take a step back and look at it from a macro point of view, it doesn't make that big a difference. But again, it comes back to the feeling of using it. It just feels like a much more usable canvas when you're at that aspect ratio. And not just
100%.
the cover display, which is obviously far more usable, but the internal display. And yeah, that's the one and only foldable, the OnePlus Open, that I really committed to using and enjoyed. So I really hope they do make a OnePlus Open 2 and use this as the base. That ultra wide 8 megapixel situation, I don't know if I could stomach that for a personal phone.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it really does feel like a downgrade. And a bit of a bummer because, the Open wasn't just, a really great folding phone. It was like the first time that OnePlus had delivered a camera system that was like flagship worthy,
Absolutely.
And then we saw a very similar camera system in the OnePlus 12 shortly thereafter. So yeah, I mean, let's see, because we don't know for sure. And, obviously, there's a lot of things we don't know. Like apparently we know it's Snapdragon 8 Elite, so that's cool. And, it'll be interesting to see what size batteries they managed to cram in that thin chassis. And, the thickness is very exciting. I think I'm not, again, I'm not like, it's not the most important thing to me, but having played with Magic V3, I have to say, like once you get that in your hands, you're not going back to Z Fold 6. Okay. Like Samsung's really gonna need to step up their game this year, but I don't feel like they're going to. I think they're just gonna be like, whatever.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. The next bit of news we have is kind of related. There's strong rumors of an Oppo Find X8 Mini that would not be too different from the Find X8. But the Find X8 already has a small 6.3 something inch screen. So this is also supposed to have a 6.3 inch screen and triple 50 megapixel rear camera. So I'm puzzled. Like, what's different? Is it a different processor? Like, or like maybe a downgraded screen? Like, I don't. What's mini about it?
It doesn't seem to make much sense.
It doesn't, right?
But then maybe is it going to be considerably lighter? Are they going to use different build materials and trying to do something that makes it a little bit more palatable to people who don't buy flagship phones? Is it going to be considerably cheaper as a result? I mean, I'm not sure about the Find X8, but the X8 Pro is a MediaTek. Is the standard X8 also a MediaTek?
Yeah,
chipset?
9400 Dimensity.
So yeah, fantastic chipset, by the way. I still get crap for calling that a very good chipset on my videos.
But it is.
Like even if you don't think about the user experience and you just look at numbers, it's still like at the level of the 8 Elite.
I know.
And I still find that hilarious because, I remember a time when, the phone has a MediaTek chipset. Oh, it's just going to be really slow and awful. But this is not that. We don't live in that timeline anymore. Like we're on a different level with this. So I don't see if they're not, I mean, maybe they're using a worse chipset, but I don't see that being a possibility because it's still an X8.
There are actually rumors that this might be an 8 Elite version.
Really?
Yeah, which is weird, because maybe not. Maybe it's like they have a new chip coming that is like a 7 gen of some kind, a 7 Elite or something that we don't know about yet. Who knows? Like I don't know. I mean, let's see how it pans out. But it's a weird rumor, and it's still a rumor that could happen. So I'm, I actually keep track of what Oppo is up to. And related to that, we have OnePlus just out of nowhere said, hey, we have a Watch 3 coming on February 18th. And then they posted a couple of pictures of it. And I'm like, what? I mean, it does track because they launched a Watch 2 last year at MWC. I'll be there in Barcelona like in a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how this Watch 3 performs and what the deal is. We obviously know very little about it right now. So, it's kind of more of a PSA to those of you who like the Watch 2 or maybe the Watch 2R and, we're waiting. Maybe it's, you'll be able to buy a Watch 3 soon. So it's kind of cool.
The
What are your
Watch 2
thoughts?
is fantastic. I really like the Watch 2. So I'm excited to see what they do here. It seems like one of the big areas of improvement for wearables this last year has been battery life. And I said in my silicon carbide battery video, if you can get that big enough improvement in a phone battery, imagine like the compute difference plus the silicon carbide battery in a wearable. That could really give a normal bog standard wearable an extra 30 to 40% battery life, which is considerable. It's something that makes you consider an upgrade instead of just going, oh, that's a slightly nicer model than what I own. You might go, actually, for me, a lot of what makes a wearable good or not is how long it lasts on a charge for me. How long do I have to put it on charge for? And how long is it going to take to charge? And so I think, the OnePlus Watch 2 battery life was fantastic.
Yeah, it really was.
If they can improve on that even still, like we could be in for a good time. I also want to point out on your podcast right now, I'm not a OnePlus fanboy as much as I like talking about OnePlus. I'm a fanboy to no company, but they're making good stuff at the moment.
You have to say their stuff
Yeah.
has been very solid. They had a bit of a renaissance starting with the Open, you know?
Absolutely.
And it's about time, honestly. I've always been a big fan of their stuff. So what else we know? We know this is going to have a titanium bezel and a sapphire crystal glass or face, which is cool. Better than the stainless steel that was on the Watch 2, but I think the Watch 2 also had sapphire. So wow, let's see. We you know, I don't know what the pricing is going to be and stuff. So stay tuned. There's one on the way. So I'll be reviewing that for sure. Other news, we get a couple of Samsung rumors and leaks here. The first one I kind of hesitated to include, but I kind of feel like phones are so boring in the West right now that I have to get excited about lightweight, thin phones somehow. So like, I'm actually super stoked about what I'm hearing about this iPhone 17 Air. Like that, I think is going to be the killer, especially if it only has one camera, because my theory, and I could be completely wrong because Apple could just be complacent, but my theory is that it's going to be like a big sensor, like 108 or 200 megapixel that starts at 0.5. So like it's an ultra wide with autofocus and OIS, and it can like bend its way to like a decent 5x zoom. That's what I'm hoping they do. Whether they'll do that, if it's just another, it's the main sensor at 50 megapixel. I'm like, what? I hope that doesn't happen. But speaking of which, there's rumors that the Galaxy S25 Edge, the super thin one, is going to have a weight of 160 grams, which is like, we're talking like Galaxy S10 levels of weight here, which is kind of, nobody has any idea how light a phone can be these days anymore. So I think hopefully it does feel that way when you pick it up. So I don't know if it's exciting per se, and it's only a rumor or leak, whatever. So, take it with a grain of salt. But are you excited about those thin phones?
I'll say I'm interested in them.
Right.
It almost is a catalyst for my intrigue into what the market is going to do over the next couple of years. So I made a video on Android Please about how the market is going to change with the OnePlus 13 being so good and but this was before it came out. Through rumors, it seemed very good. I believe it was already available in China. And then the S25 Ultra was rumored to be marginal upgrades over last year, which is what happened. So you're welcome. I was right. but also, I think that maybe these phones, these Edge, Air, whatever you want to call them, the lightweight phones, are just a reason for Samsung and potentially Apple to have their name in headlines in a positive light, because wow, there's a new product line or subline, because their phones are going to be just bang average.
Yes, for sure.
Maybe it's not 100% of the reason they're making these things, but I feel like it's part of the consideration. Well,
that's what I'm saying. I think, it's a kind of a chicken and egg. I feel like
absolutely
I'm excited because we're getting some new different phones, but at the same time it's absolutely completely manufactured, right? It's like, it's almost like they had a conference call, like, hi, I'm Tim, hi, I'm Samsung guy. Let's have some thin phones. Yeah. Deal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think it's interesting. I mean, some people really love their small phones, and obviously that's been a hard sell, as we know, but I believe that's a valid thing. And so if you want a thin phone, great, and a light phone, there you go. But related to that, it'll be interesting to see, because there's now also rumors that the S26 series next year is finally going to get carbon silicon anode batteries, which I'm taking that one with a grain of salt, simply because I feel like Samsung as a company, as an entity, has like some kind of PTSD trauma around the Note 7 fiasco. Yeah. And because of that, they're going to be very conservative in implementing silicon carbon. And I'm not sure that's going to be S26, but I could be wrong. And for all we know, the S25 Edge could be the first one, because it could benefit, right? Because of the reduction in thickness to, not compromise battery life. Maybe they'll throw in a silicon carbon battery or get their feet wet that way.
Yeah, if there was going to be a phone that would benefit, that would be the one to do it with.
I mean, it'd be terrible if they shipped this S25 Edge and on the box it says, 3750 milliamp hours,
Yeah.
right? Like, ouch. Because I don't know if it has a Snapdragon 8 Elite, how that's going to pan out in terms of performance, even though it's a very efficient chip, right?
I mean, how are they going to get I think I saw somewhere, maybe it was an article I read about the cooling. They're going to have a different cooling setup for it.
Yeah.
With potentially with the Edge, which, part of the reason I feel that the X8 has done so well in its in the phones that it has been in is that in each of those phones, the cooling setup seems to be a level above what it was for the 8 Gen 3.
Yeah, you're right.
So maybe that has an impact. Maybe they undervolt it. Maybe they just go, you know what, people buying an Edge
so
don't need that much.
You read that secretly somehow Qualcomm out of nowhere released a 7-core version of the 8 Elite.
Oh, really? I have not seen that.
It's made almost no news. It's on their website. A few companies covered it. I think GSM Arena had an article about it. But yeah, and they clearly state it's optimized for thin and light phones. So I have a feeling that, the optimization is one less core and less heat, which is fine. It'll be interesting to see how the performance changes in terms of like raw, max perf when you're like doing gaming and stuff. I think for the kind of audiences who are going to buy these phones, it's going to be completely irrelevant. Like I'm absolutely convinced that you can be running a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and still be perfectly happy. Or maybe not a Gen 1, but because that one was made by Samsung Foundries. I think the 8 Plus Gen 1 was the redeeming one. It had the TSMC foundry. It's basically the same phone with a different manufacturing process, and it's instantly, a better chip. So
yeah,
8 Gen 2 is okay.
I mean, even so, I think the 8 Gen 1 for a lot of people is, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So we'll see how it goes if they put these silicon carbon batteries in the S26 next year, or even in the X25 Edge coming up. iPhone SE, how do you feel about the iPhone SE? Have you ever used an iPhone SE?
Yeah.
I'm excited because, well, not excited. I'm happy that the SE is continuing simply because it's nice to have an affordable iPhone, even though it does make some crazy compromises in some areas like cameras by having a single camera that's just a main camera. It's like weird because ultra wide is kind of what I'd want as well. Maybe you can sacrifice on the tele. I'm not sure how you feel, but I feel like for me, it's more like if I have to sacrifice one, it's a tough one, but I've probably sacrificed the tele before.
You were saying earlier about the idea of an ultra wide that just pinches in and uses computational photography to make up the difference, right?
That's an idea, right?
This is, I cannot remember what video I made, but that was an idea I had put in that video sometime last year, where I just feel like it makes a lot of sense. If we're going that computational photography route, if you only are going to put one camera in a smartphone, why not make it like a 1/1.3 ultra wide, 100 megapixels, doesn't even have to be 200, and you get 0.5 all the way to say 2.5 times.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. But I really like the SE. I know a lot of people that use that kind of phone.
Yes.
So, my mum had an iPhone 8. She switched to, I believe it's a second generation SE. And I imagine in a few years' time, she'll probably end up with something like the fourth or first generation SE. And it's just one of those devices that it's not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's not going to smash the reviews, but it's the people's phone almost. It's just, it's not going to, a lot of people are still going to buy the base model regular iPhone, but there's a sizable chunk of people who don't want to spend $700-800 on a phone, but still want the iPhone experience, still like the way that the mail is set up, or like only using the App Store because they have purchases within the Apple App Store, or they take the odd photo every now and then that they want to show their friends and family stuff, but they aren't crazy enthusiastic about it. And yeah, I really like that Apple is still doing an SE.
I like that phone exists. Exactly. That's why I'm excited that they're making another one. And of course, it's going to be a big upgrade in terms of, finally having Face ID and an OLED screen and all that stuff. And so there's renders that have leaked. Check them out. Let me know on the social media what you guys think of the new design. I think it's cool, and I'm looking forward to that phone. My spouse, who's also my producer, Theo, has had iPhone SEs pretty much the whole time since I think after the 5S or something like that, they went to an SE first gen, then second gen, then third gen, and they'll probably go to this one as well. So kind of an important phone. It's kind of like the Pixel A series, right? It's like you can't go wrong with that. There are some compromises, sure, but you can't go wrong. And I think that in that sense, I guess maybe Galaxy A series is similar for Samsung land. But also, Moto Razr Plus 2025 is leaked the renders again. This would be the Razr 60 Ultra if you're in other markets. This will be the successor to last year's, essentially flagship flip folding phone from Moto, since they don't make a book style yet. I love the Razr. It's my favorite of the flip phones that you can get in the West. I think that, it's better than the Z Flip, in my opinion. I know that in terms of like reliability and ruggedness, I think Samsung still has an edge. But I feel like in terms of the way it looks and the simplicity of the software experience, and cameras are still a Moto things that needs to be improved. But I think that for its intended audience, the Razr is a solid phone, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new Razr Plus this year or Razr 60 Ultra. And hopefully they go back to an ultra wide and a main instead of a main and a stupid 2x unstabilized portrait lens that nobody needs.
Yeah, and the screens were so good on the previous Razrs. They were always fast. I believe it was 165 on the internal.
That's right, which is like, why do you even need that?
Yeah.
It's like bragging rights.
They did it, and it was great. And the experience, the Motorola, it's frustrating. These are the kind of phones that some people, armchair enthusiasts, will never understand what makes the experience of using a Razr foldable. But when you actually use these things, sure, on paper they're not the same as the Galaxies, but you just feel like this was designed from the ground up, software and hardware, to be a foldable device. And yeah, sure, I really hope they do make a book style. I don't know if they will, just because I guess the Razr brand is really leveraging its past being a flip phone, right, for it to make a lot of sense in the marketing material.
How about a Moto Lenovo co-branded ThinkBook?
I would buy that immediately. 100%.
Yeah, me too.
And with the 165 hertz screen,
100% with the software from Moto as well. Brilliant. My spouse actually also, the second phone they have is a Razr Plus 2023. So they wanted the flip, and they're like, I'm gonna suffer through Android to have the flip as my second phone. And I was like, yeah, do it. And they love it.
Absolutely.
So the last thing we have for the week is nothing headphones rumors. I would totally not be surprised if that was a thing, because why? It's such a low hanging fruit. The earbuds,
slam dunk.
Yeah, the earbuds have been phenomenal. They're beautiful, but they also sound incredibly good. And of course you want to make noise canceling headphones like these Sonys, right? Like, of course you want to do that.
Especially with the XM5s, like not exactly smashing what the XM4s were doing.
Correct. Like, and the fact that we're getting new Sony headphones soon, apparently.
Yeah.
And so who knows what they're going to do with that. I've never been a fan of Bose for traveling, at least. I have an XM4 pair, as you can see, that I'm wearing right now, but I also have an XM5, and I use the XM5 exclusively in the house, basically, and then the XM4s when I travel. And I have Bayer Dynamics for the podcast in the studio. But honestly, I'm on board 100%. Like, I love Nothing's products in general, and they're particularly their audio products. And if they do this, I will want one badly.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they work with, it was DMS, I believe, on the Nothing Ear 2? Yeah. I used the Ear 2. My AirPods Pro first gen died the other day. And there was like a crossover where I owned the Ear 2 for like the 6 months prior. And I still use them. I run with them. I'm on the indoor bike in them. I wear them around the office when I'm shooting B-roll. And I love what DMS did. I used the Ear 1 and didn't love the way they sounded, but I really like how Nothing has that one, original OnePlus energy that Carl Pei brought. Listen to the community.
Fantastic.
And just fix the stuff that people has to fix. And yeah, I honestly, I don't want to come across as more of a OnePlus fanboy. If they made the headphones, I'm probably going to pre-order those, and I don't tend to pre-order products. But I agree. The Ear 2 was so good that I think I'd have to go for the the headphones.
And I think their products in general have been, there's something to be said about Carl, right? Like I think he's got a knack for making great product. And, the OnePlus Nord, the last phone he did for OnePlus, right? The original Nord was such a hit. Like I felt like, oh my God, like that was like the Pixel A of the OnePlus world. Now I got the Nord 2. I never got the 3 or the 4. But I'm wondering, like you use these, you've probably had them. Like, are they still as good as they used to be?
I haven't used the most recent Nords, but with the Nord one, I just remember distinctly reviewing, I believe it's the 8T, either before or after, just before or just after, and just going, yeah, the Nord does most of this. Like,
Right.
I don't know why I would buy the 8T, because the 8 and the 8 Pro were phenomenal. The 8T felt like almost a step back, but also felt so close to the Nord, like, why would I not just buy the Nord? And that blue color was gorgeous as well.
I know. I felt like he did such a great job with the Nord that Pete looked at it and went, that's just, we can't make money with this. It's just too good for its price. And Carl was like, but that's the whole point. That's exactly why this is what I was trying to do here. And I think, my theory is that that's how they parted ways, right? Like they didn't agree on where to go forward from there. I think it was amicable, but I'm just saying that's when he was like, wait, I can do my own thing. I know all them factory people and the supply chain people. And now I can hire some designers, and I've got my friends at Teenage Engineering because, he's Swedish as well. And so it just kind of gelled with Nothing. And yeah, I really like the Nothing software on their phones. Like the phones themselves, I mean, the glyph's great, but I can do without. But I really do feel like their OS experience is really great. Of course, cameras can be better. They still need to work on that, you can tell, but it's fine.
Just partner with Hasselblad. That will fix everything.
Spoken like a OnePlus fan. All right, Ryan, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, your various social media handles, and of course, tell them about your YouTube channel, which is really awesome. You guys need to subscribe.
Yeah, so I post videos mostly on Android Police on YouTube and on my channel, which is just Ryan-Thomas or the Ryan Thomas. On socials, I'm _Ryan Thomas, although honestly, I don't post too much social media these days. But yeah, you'll find me making videos. That's my main thing.
Yes, and you, like me, are into mobile photography. So if you are into mobile photography as well, you really absolutely have to watch Ryan's videos. And you know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankerl, like the comic book character, but drop the vowels, TNKGRL on all the social. I'm still somehow like lurking on Twitter. I kind of hate it, but I'm mostly on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. I'm on Instagram. So find me there and talk with me and Ryan about this podcast. And then you know where the podcast is. It's mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcast platforms. So please, if it's your first time here, please consider subscribing. Tell your friends about it. Rate the show and review the show on your app if you can. And then there's a YouTube channel as well. It's not very, busy in terms of content, but I do post some hands-ons and unboxings occasionally. Mobile Tech Podcast is the YouTube channel, of course. And you know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, all that stuff. You can comment about the podcast itself on the videos if you want. I'll respond. And finally, there's a Patreon. If you want to support me, there is a video version of this podcast that's exclusive to my Patreons, at least in the first week. And you get it in advance. You get it about 12 to 24 hours ahead of the audio version, which is free and public. So you get to see us. Sometimes we have devices that we brandish. Sometimes FedEx shows up in the middle of the show, and it's kind of fun. I leave a lot of bloopers and things in there. And also, I sometimes go overtime, and so you'll get extra content. So consider supporting me, patreon.com/Tankerl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I want to thank our sponsor for this show, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And Ryan, thanks so much for taking your time to join the show this week. It's so great to have you on.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been phenomenal. Loved it.
Fantastic. We'll have you on sometime in the future again. And folks, I will have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.